And I've got some emails. Got an email from Denise Sandy, Brooklyn, New York. Dear Pastor Jim and all of saints at Grace and Truth, we thank God for you and for everything. Hope everyone is continuing in the well way. Recently, while viewing one of the DVDs, you mentioned Rusty and what he suffered. I'm praying for him. As for those of us here in Brooklyn, we are in the light. We continue to share truth as we walk in the narrow way. I've been taken off the mailing list and would like to be replaced. One of my many shortcomings is sustained communication, so please forgive me. Jim, your teaching has been used by the Lord to clear up and clean up false doctrine, and now things have come together in an unspeakable way. I give the Lord praise for you and pray that his will be done in your life. Agape. Well, we love you, Denise. You just keep watching. Frank Bishop, Queensland, Australia, writes to us. Dear brother, thanks for the DVDs. You have sent to me. I have a bit of backlog, but God willing, I'll catch up. As I said in my last email, I'm being tried as by fire and thlipsis and tribulation. At present, I am renovating my son's bathroom. He has no plan, and I've got to nut out what to do and how to do it. I don't know what nut out means. I'm sure that's an Australian term, evidently. I'm sure I will get it done in time. Largely, I seem to be jack of all trades and the only one who is doing anything. I guess that is what fathers are for. He won't wear me if I try to speak to him on things of the Lord. Except here. You put where. I think you meant here. Hear me. The sad part is he reckons he is saved. Please hang in there with me. I have no one here like-minded to help to support Agape Frank. And then I got something from Carolyn Colligan out in Oklahoma. You know that Richard Roberts got arrested for drunk driving this past week. And she sent a report. She sent me the traffic report, and of course it's the big thing in Tulsa. Well, do I believe that those lying false teachers will drink and get drunk? Well, certainly they will. They'll cuss and they'll tell dirty jokes and everything else. But the cultivator, she calls me the cultivator and sent this picture of me. Cult leader. Cultivator, yeah. That's funny. And then I got an email from, well, let me see here. One from John Newell, I believe. I had one. Yeah, well, it's a long letter from John. I won't read that. That's too long. Oh, it's just a bunch of verses on false prophets and false teachers. Thank you, John. We love you. Love everybody up there in New York. And then I got several phone calls. Got calls from Sam Daly in Madison, Tennessee. Mildred Seeby in Charleston, South Carolina. Johnny Kirkman over in Kannapolis, North Carolina. And David Chambers, Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. His father used to be a Pentecostal preacher, and they said they come to the realization they were in charismatic movement, realized it was all a lie, and he loves this message, and so does his father. Brian Duffy, Cincinnati, Ohio. Linda Dortch Randolph, Oklahoma City. Mark Hoffman, Leander, Texas. Then Lewis down in Austin, Texas. He writes to us, wants to come visit. Jerome McDaniels, Atlanta, Georgia. Jeff Stewart, Oklahoma City. Sherry Johnson out in Tucson. Diana Mason, Nashville, Tennessee. Pat Boykin, Cincinnati, Ohio. Bob Bell, Livingston, Texas. And that'll be enough reading for right now. Don't forget our television in Nashville, if you can get a hold of it. We're on in Nashville every Monday night and Saturday night, 10 o'clock. And we're on Tuesday evening at 5, Thursday night at 7 on Channel 3 in Hendersonville. And we're also on Channel 176 at midnight, Wednesday morning, Friday morning at midnight. That's 176 on Comcast, and we're on Thursday night, 11 o'clock on Channel 49. And then we're on radio every Saturday morning. That's WNQM 1300 on the dial at 8 o'clock. And that's radio. And just be watching. And we always like to announce we've got a lot of people that are really in a struggle. We try to help the needy and the poor. We've got several people here at Grace and Truth. Plus, we've got people out in our TV and our internet world that are struggling, that are part of this ministry, and they've been with us a while. And people like Angela Roberts in Texas, and Sheila Wells down in Louisiana, and Patricia Donaldson up in Indiana, and others that we try to reach out and help. So if you want to help the needy, you can either bring food to the food pantry. Probably one of the best ways is to send a check and put on the bottom of it for the needy, and we'll get this to them. We've got people that got every kind of needs. These are people that are just barely able to live, that make between $450 and $1,000 a month. And they're on food stamps, and some of them can't hardly live, but they love the truth. Most of them never ask for anything. Some will call, and when they ask, they're really hurting. So just be aware of these people. They need our help. You can send food cards. You can send... I get these to people constantly. And I just believe in helping the poor. If you've got a decent job, there's no need that you can't contribute a little to help these people. And we give a lot from the ministry to them. And some of them they're behind on their light bill. And you say, well, I pay my light bill. Well, yeah, but you make more than $700 a month, too. And just be aware of these people. They're really struggling. I need a couple of cars for needy people. I may have one. I think we got one located, but I need another one. And these are people that want to come to church that are having a hard time. So if you have an old car, and we're looking something for about $800 to $1,000. One, we don't want something that's going to fall apart. One that's mechanically good, it'll get from point A to point B. So if you know of any, let me know. Keep your eye peeled. Do we have any visitors? Do you have a visitor here? Yeah. What was your name?
Benjamin.
Benjamin. We're glad to have you, Benjamin.
Thank you.
Did you come with Victor or what?
Yeah, I did.
Did you? Glad to have you here. There's water back here, restrooms over here. And anybody else? It's good to see the Willies back from down south. And they're going to be moving here. They're going to be looking this afternoon for an apartment. So come around and we'll talk about some place you can settle. And Kurt works in computers. That's right, isn't it? So he's going to be looking to get in computers of some kind. So if you got a job If anybody got a job, that's what he needs. Or kind of, at least, any of you can steer him somewhere. Maybe Todd can steer him somewhere. You might be able to. He's sitting right there beside you, so Todd does computers, so forth. Well, let's go to the Lord in prayer. And our picnic is on the 23rd. So everybody be preparing to come to the picnic. Okay? Turn your cell phones off. Okay? Appreciate it. All right. Well, let's go to the Lord in prayer. It's Sunday morning, and our subject is the history of Israel. I'm trying to teach you what the Bible's about. I want you to learn the timelines and the characters. I'm not here to be famous or be somebody. If I was, I'd be teaching something else, because the message we teach is a very hard message to take if you're living in the flesh, and it's difficult enough for the believers or the elect. We preach predestination. We preach that God does not love everybody. We teach Christmas and Easter are paganism, along with Halloween. It's the same thing as Mardi Gras. All these are the same thing in different cultures. And we teach that Jesus is God in the flesh and he died to save sinners, but all that paganism hasn't anything to do with him. And I'm trying to teach you the culture, the customs, the idioms, the metaphors. I'm trying to teach you the Scripture as it's laid out sequentially, the events, the characters. And I want you to learn to get a hold of this. There's a systematic way to learn the Bible, and I want to help you to see that. We are studying, we've been going through the book of Genesis for about 2 years. And we went through the covenant to Abraham in the 17th chapter. Is actually, God promised Abraham the land. He promised him the land in the 12th chapter. He said he'd give him a son in the 15th chapter of Genesis. And he is in the lineage of Shem, the second born of Noah. And before the flood, and Noah was, you had of course, you had in the first chapter, you've got the creation. The second chapter, you've got Adam being created, Eve being created, God forbidding them for eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then the third chapter, Eve partakes of the tree, and then God, and then the fourth chapter, Cain kills Abel, and in that same fourth chapter, verse 25, Seth takes the place of Abel. And then the fifth chapter, you see the lineage, the righteous lineage of Seth going all the way down to Noah. And then the sixth through the ninth chapter, you've got the flood. And we've gone all the way through this, and then we got up to Abraham, who is a descendant of Shem. And that's, then the word Semitic comes from the word Shem. And we get on down to, we got on down to Abraham, then Isaac, his son, and then Jacob, the son of Isaac. And then God gives the covenant. He gave the covenant to Abraham, then extended to Isaac, extended to Jacob. Jacob's name is changed to Israel in the 32nd chapter of Genesis. And then we see in the 37th chapter of Genesis, we see Joseph, after many adventures of Jacob, when he ends up over in the land of Haran, or what we call Babylon, or what we would actually call Iraq. Jacob ends up over here, brings his two wives, Leah and Rachel, back down here, and they come back down to Canaan. What is Canaan back then? And that is the land of promise. It's going to be, the name is going to be changed to Israel later on. Jacob comes back, brings his two wives and 11 sons with him. Then when he gets back, his 12th son, Benjamin, is born in Bethlehem. And then we see that we see that Joseph is sold into bondage there in the 37th chapter, and then we see that Joseph is raised up in Egypt to become the leader of Egypt in the 41st chapter when he interprets the Pharaoh's dream, and then after he brings his brothers over and his father over after his adventures with them, when he gives them grain and he fools them, doesn't tell them who he is, and then they get over there into Egypt, we see that it's time for Jacob to die. Or it says it came time for Israel to die. And Jacob is referred to as Israel because his 12 sons each have a tribe, and they become the nation of Israel. We're over here where we are is in the 49th chapter of Genesis, and Jacob, or Israel, brings his 12 sons around him, and he's telling them, I'm going to give you the blessings and cursings. And he starts off with his firstborn Reuben, and he more or less kind of puts a blessing curse on Reuben because Reuben was unstable. He slept with his stepmother's handmaid Bilhah, and then he does the same thing with Simeon and Levi, because Simeon and Levi are in cahoots when they get together, and Simeon leads in this rebellion over in the 34th chapter when Dinah, their sister, has this affair with Shechem, and they make a deal with Shechem and his father Hamor that they will be circumcised. Well, when they're circumcised, Simeon leads Levi in, and they slaughter them, and they murder them, and then we see that God puts more or less a type of a curse along with a blessing upon them. And then Judah, the fourth-born son, there in the eighth verse, we see that he's blessed above the other brethren because out of Judah is going to come the king. And then we went on to Zebulon. Zebulon was the 10th born, but Zebulon is the land. The land of Zebulon is exactly where Nazareth is, and just above Nazareth is Cana, and that's where Jesus' first miracle. And Jesus ends up moving over here north of the Sea of Galilee, right up here at this point up here, and that is when he's up here, he starts performing all his miracles there at Capernaum, and that becomes his hometown. Well, then we went on down through Dan and Gad and Asher and Naphtali, and Joseph received the inheritance of all Israel, because Joseph's second-born son Ephraim in the previous chapter, the 48th chapter, receives the blessing of Israel. He's going to have the inheritance. The inheritance will come from northern Israel. Here's northern Israel right here. And Benjamin belongs with southern Judah. Simeon belongs with northern Israel, and the reason Simeon is down here is God separated him. It's kind of like sending a kid to his room, because Simeon was the leader in that rebellion in the murder of Shechem. So he sticks Simeon down there. He says he's going to separate Simeon from Levi. And Levi he spreads all over Israel, because Levi, the third born of Jacob, becomes the priest of God. Well, when you look right here, here's Dan, Ephraim. Here's Gad, Reuben. This would be the boundary right here of northern Israel. Right here. Like this. Like so. Here's Reuben over here. Reuben is on the eastern bank of the Jordan River and east of the Dead Sea. Gad is east of the Dead Sea. Mount Pisgah is somewhere about where I'm pointing. That's where Moses went up on Mount Pisgah and got to view the land, but he couldn't go across the land. But part of the land was over here. So Gad, Reuben, and East Manasseh was over here. This is West Manasseh. This is East Manasseh. So the borders of northern Israel is like so. Like this. Right there. This plus this. And this is southern Judah, Benjamin, and Judah. These two tribes comprise the southern kingdom of southern Israel, or southern Judah. And that's important to learn and remember that. So I appreciate Todd for bringing this map. I need a couple more maps like this. This will erase my marker. Okay, let me just, that's good. That's wonderful. That's good. I like that. All right, now what we've done, we've got down to the 12th son, Benjamin. Benjamin in the 27th verse of the 48th chapter. Benjamin shall raven as a wolf. Wolf is one of the most fierce of animals when it goes out to kill sheep. Wolves hate sheep. They kill sheep because they hate them. They don't kill them necessarily to eat them. They just don't like them. Wolves are false teachers according to Jesus in Matthew 7 and according to the Apostle Paul in the 20th chapter of Acts. Ravening wolves means they will come out and slaughter. Someone was telling me about a shepherd or somewhere they had read where there was that you, Willie, talking about 120 sheep or something, and the wolves came down and just slaughtered this literal flock. They come down to kill them. There may be 7 or 8 wolves, and they'll come down off of a hill in the middle of the night, and they'll leave 100 sheep dead. If there's 100 sheep in the fold, they'll kill all of them and leave them there dead and not eat them. They kill them because they hate sheep. False teachers hate sheep. They hate us. They don't like this truth that we tell. And Benjamin will fight like a wolf. That's what it's talking about. It's not talking about Benjamin will be a wolf, but Benjamin will fight like a wolf. He will raven as a wolf. In fact, he went up against his brothers. He went up against 11 tribes of Israel, and we'll look at that again in a minute. And he shall raven as a wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. Benjamin is going to be tough to deal with when it comes to war. Each one of these tribes, each one of them had a different personality. Issachar up here, they said, we don't go to war. We don't like to war. We're just farmers. We're easygoing guys, easygoing people. Benjamin said, I'll fight at the drop of a hat. They were hard-nosed people, and they fought like lions, like wolves, like tigers. They were fierce in battle. In fact, let's go over here back where we've been looking at in Judges. Mary's got high blood pressure, and she can't stand it if I'm up here messing up. Got pink lips. Mary does that at home, too. Y'all need to understand that. Get that off your mouth. I can't stand that. She is very fidgety. All right. Go back to Judges, the 19th chapter. This is about Benjamin, about the tribe of Benjamin, just how fierce Benjamin is. And there's a story that precedes this. This is the last story in the book of Judges. Now, there is a Levite who lives in Mount Ephraim. And, gosh, I'm flipping around, not even flipping over. There's a Levite, according to this first verse, that lives in Mount Ephraim. First of all, you need to know where Mount Ephraim is. Read verse 1. It came to pass in those days when there was no king in Israel. During the days of the judges, there's no king. If you read the previous chapter, verse 7, there was no magistrate in the land. No one to tell him what to do. If you look at 18:1, there was no king in Israel. If you look at 17:6, there was no king in Israel. So everyone did, according to the last verse of this book, everyone did what was right in their own eyes. They did what they felt like they should do. So when you look at the book of Judges and there's no set law laid down, and they do some crazy things, they were just as crazy as we are. We do some crazy things as believers, don't we? Well, they do some crazy things. It doesn't mean because something is in the Bible that you're supposed to do it. Because these guys were sinners just like you and I are. So there's this Levite. Levite, anytime you see Levite, that means these are the sons of Levi. When you look at the word Leviticus, Leviticus comes from the word Levi. This is the law of the Levites. Leviticus comes from Levi. And the Levites were the priests of God, and this was the third son of Jacob, third son. Remember, God substituted Levi for Reuben because he was unstable as water. Since Reuben was unstable, God says the inheritance should have gone to Reuben, and the priesthood should have gone to Reuben. But I'm giving the inheritance, and the inheritance should go to Reuben. And the kingship should have gone to Reuben. But I'm giving the king to Judah, the firstborn, giving the king to Judah that belonged to Reuben. King will come to Judah. And from Levi, he will get the priesthood. And Joseph, through his son Ephraim, will get the blessing or the inheritance. So Israel was divided up into these kind of categories: priesthood to Levi, king to Judah, and the inheritance to Joseph in that 48th chapter. And all three of these belong to Reuben. That's the way it was in the east. Now, we see there's a Levi here. There's a Levite, and he's sojourning. Now, he's sojourning because the Levites lived all over the land. A sojourner was a visitor, was a stranger, a man that was visiting in the land. And he was sojourning in the side of Mount Ephraim, and it took him a concubine out of Bethlehem, Judah. Now, where is Mount Ephraim? Ephraim is divided up here. There's some mountains right here, and Mount Ephraim was in these mountains in Ephraim. Here's Ephraim right here. This is the head of northern Israel. This is the ruler of northern Israel. And then he went down. This man, this Levite, this sojourner, he could be called over here to Manasseh. He could be called over here to Asher because he's a Levite. Levites didn't have land that they owned. They say, we need a priest over here, so we'd end up going over here. But he's sojourning here. That word sojourn means he's there temporarily. So he comes down here to Bethlehem, and he gets him a concubine. A concubine is a secondary wife. So he's got this concubine, and he's headed back, and he brings her up here to Mount Ephraim, and she apostatizes. This is a picture of Israel apostatizing from God. We know that, and we'll look at that again. So she apostatizes, comes back home, and he goes down there to get her, and he heads back up. He's going back to Mount Ephraim, but he gets up here to Jerusalem, and he won't go into Jerusalem because Jerusalem is not an Israelite city. Jerusalem is a pagan city, and the people who live there, that it's called Jebus at that time, Jebus, and they are Jebusites, and they are heathens. And he says, we're not going to go into that city as he's coming back because they're heathens. Well, it goes about 5 miles north of there to a city called Gibeah. Gibeah. And Gibeah is right about here. There's Jerusalem. Gibeah is right here. I just put Gibeah, just to put a G. Right there. And then there's a town right above that, about 5 miles or so above that, called Mizpah. Mizpah. And he's on his way back, but he stops at Gibeah. Now, Gibeah is very important. Gibeah is the home of King Saul. Gibeah is the home of the first king of Israel, first king, Saul. Now, Gibeah is a very important town, but Gibeah has one of the things that's really unusual about it. If you'll go with me over here, just hold your place there, and go over here to 2 Samuel 21. 2 Samuel 21. I brought this out Wednesday night, and I didn't finish it up. 2 Samuel, 21st chapter. This is very important to understand. 2 Samuel, 21st chapter. There was a famine in the days of David, 3 years, year after year. We're right at the end of David's life. His reign ends in the 24th chapter of this book. He steps down in the next book, which is the first chapter of 1 Kings, to set up Solomon, his son, as king of Israel. So David is right at the end of... David is very old, very weary, By this point, his son Absalom has tried to take over the kingdom. His chief counselor Ahithophel, who is Bathsheba's grandfather, has defected and gone over to Absalom. Absalom has been killed. Amnon is killed in the 13th chapter of this book. In the 12th chapter of this book, Amnon rapes David's daughter Tamar, and Amnon is his son. He rapes his half-sister, and Absalom has plotted for 2 years to kill Amnon, and he does that at a festival. And then when we get over here, David is just so weary. His favorite sons have died. He's got other sons, but not like Absalom. He loved Absalom more than anyone. And then David is at the end of his life. It's just relating some of the things about his life. There was a famine in the days of David 3 years, year after year. And David inquired of the Lord, and the Lord answered, "It is for Saul, for his bloody house, because he slew the Gibeonites." That was his hometown. Why would he do that? That doesn't make any sense unless you read the next verse. And the king called the Gibeonites and said unto them, Now the Gibeonites were not of the children of Israel, but of the remnant of the Amorites. Those were Amorites in Gibeah. And the children of Israel had sworn unto them, and Saul sought to slay them in his zeal to the children of Israel and to Judah. Wherefore David said unto the Gibeonites, What shall I do for you? Wherewith shall I make atonement, that ye may bless the inheritance of the Lord? And the Gibeonites say, We want some of the heads of Saul's sons. And that's what David takes to him. He cuts their heads off and takes them to the Gibeonites. Because the Gibeonites feel like we've been done wrong, because in the book of Joshua, Joshua makes a covenant with the Gibeonites that they'll be at peace with Israel from then on. Well, what in the world is Gibeah, right here in the middle of Israel? What are they doing being an Amorite nation? What was Jerusalem doing being there in Israel under the name Jebus? And they were pagans. What are they doing in Israel being pagans? That's because Israel never drove them out. God tells Joshua, when you go into the land, the very end of Joshua, and you repossess the land that I've given to your father Abraham, drive these people out. Well, when you see something like this about the Amorites, and you see that Jerusalem is a pagan, go back over here to Judges, the 19th chapter, and we'll see that. The man is coming back. He's gone and picked up his concubine down here in Bethlehem, Judah, and he's headed back up here, and they just get outside of Jerusalem on their way back to Mount Ephraim. They just get up here to Jerusalem, and here's what happens in verse 10. But the man, look in verse 11. And when they were by Jebus, the day was far spent, and the servant said unto his master, Come, I pray thee, and let us turn into the city of the Jebusites and lodge in it. And his master said unto him, We will not turn aside hither into the city of a stranger that is not of the children of Israel. We will pass over to Gibeah, because he says in verse 10, And they came over against Jebus, which is Jerusalem. So Jebus is Jerusalem. What are these people doing here? Well, it's like we said, they did not drive them out. If you go to the first chapter of this book, you go back to the first chapter of the book of Judges. The book of Judges is, let me explain something to you. Joshua is leading the children of Israel into the land to repossess the land. It's Joshua that comes up here into the land of Moab. All this is the land of Moab here. All of this up here is the land of Ammon. And Ammon and Moab, this is modern day Jordan right here. Modern day Jordan. Of course, when Joshua comes into the land, Joshua is leading the children of Israel in to possess the land. Moses doesn't get to go in. He gets up to go up on Mount Pisgah. Mount Pisgah's lofty heights, the way we sing it in the song, and view the land, but he doesn't get to move over. Joshua, his second in command, leads Israel into the land to possess the land. First of all, he goes in, and you go over there in that 6th chapter of Joshua, and he goes out against Jericho, and he conquers Jericho, and the walls fall down. Then he goes over to Ai. He goes to Ai, and he conquers Ai. You remember the story of Ai and the wedge of gold and the goodly Babylonish garment, and Achan wants the Babylonish garment, and God has Achan killed because he says, don't take any part of the land. Well, Joshua sets up, all through the book of Joshua, what Joshua does is set up these boundaries for each one of these tribes. This is more what Joshua was about, conquering these pagans, conquering the pagans. They conquered them because this land was given about 600 years before. It was given to Abraham as an eternal covenant. He said, this is your land. It belongs to no one. The land is mine, God says, and you can't give it or trade it to anybody. God will be displeased if anybody tries to give off the Gaza Strip or the West Bank. It doesn't belong to them to give. It belongs to God. So Joshua goes in, leads them into the land, and Joshua conquers the land, and God tells them to drive out all these pagans, but they don't do it. And when you look in this first chapter, if you look in the first chapter, I won't read all of it. I'll spend all my day doing that. But when you look up at verse 21, and the children of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusites. Well, we know that when we get over here at the end of the book, getting that 19th chapter, that Levite is coming back, and he says, I'm not going to that city. It's a Jebusite city. They didn't drive them out, but they were supposed to, weren't they? In verse 27, neither did Manasseh drive out the inhabitants of Bethshean. Verse 29, neither did Ephraim drive out the Canaanites. One of the most common of all the Canaanites, whenever you said Amorite, you meant the majority of the Canaanites, Amorites. And they were all heathens. Now the Amorites were fighters. They liked to fight. They liked to war. Well, Gibeah was an Amorite city. I wonder where Saul got his attitude of fighting. Saul liked to fight. Saul lost his temper and got outrageously angry in his first battle in the 11th chapter of 1 Samuel when he went out against Nahash, the king of the Ammonites. He just got enraged. Where did he learn to fight? He had never been a fighting leader. He just got in a rage. You know, the Bible says evil communications corrupt good morals. Saul was corrupt from the start because he may have been a goodly man, not a goodlier man in all Israel, but Saul had to have been very, very corrupt from the start. But he was corrupted by the people he was raised with. So when the people say, give us a king, God says, I'll give you a captain. And he picks a man out of a city of the Amorites that are dwelling in the land, and they're not supposed to be there if Israel had done what they were told to do. Look here in verse 29, or look at verse 30. Neither did Zebulon drive out the inhabitants of Kitron. Zebulun didn't drive them out. Neither did Asher drive out the inhabitants of Akko, nor the inhabitants of Sidon. In the land of Asher is the city of Sidon, see? In the land of Asher is the city of Tyre. They just let those pagans stay there. So they had cities around the country. That's why they were constantly in a battle with the people in their own lands. And then in verse 33, neither did Naphtali drive out the inhabitants of Bethshemesh, nor the inhabitants of Beth-Anath. And he dwelt among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land. And we find that in the 3rd chapter, they start marrying them. Great day in the morning. What is Israel thinking about? About the same thing America's thinking about. We marry into unbelief, don't we? Now let's go back over here to the 19th chapter. So he says, no, we're not going to go into this city. In verse 12, and his master said unto him, we shall turn aside hither into the city of the stranger. We shall not turn aside into the city of a stranger, which is, speaking of Jerusalem, which will be Jerusalem in the future. And we know that David's nephew, Joab, God says, whoever is able, in 1 Chronicles 11, 4 and 6, the Bible said, the scripture says, David says, whoever is able to conquer the city of Jebus will be my commander. He will be my commanding general. He will be captain of the host of Israel. And that was his nephew Joab. And Joab was a murderer. Whew. And David had his hands full from then on. And he said unto his servant, verse 13, let us draw near to one of these places to lodge all night in Gibeah or in Ramah. Well, Gibeah was an Amorite city. For the life of me, I don't know how the Levite knew that Jerusalem was an Amorite, was a Jebusite city, and he didn't know that about 5 miles above this, Gibeah was a Amorite city. They were all pagans, and the Amorites loved to fight. I really believe that's what Saul was raised in. He was raised fighting. This is probably why that in the land of Benjamin, remember Benjamin is going to raven as a wolf. Up here in Gibeah, that's in the land of Benjamin. Therefore, the Amorites were in there probably teaching the children of Benjamin to war, to fight. And this is what Saul got into, and I'll get into Saul in a little bit later. Now, we find that this man goes into the city of Gibeah. When he gets into Gibeah, no one will receive him into their house. And of course, the laws of hospitality in the Middle East, it's not just being nice to people. This was a law of the scripture that you had to take care of you had to bring people into your house. You had to feed them. This is in the book of the law. You had to do this. Well, they're not bringing in this Levite, and he sits down in the streets, him and his concubine and his servants with him, and an old man comes out of the house here in Gibeah and says, come into my house, I will take care of you. Evidently, he was a believer, perhaps a Jew. Well, this old man brings him into the house. We see that in verse 16. Behold, there came an old man from his work out of the field at evening, which was also of Mount Ephraim. He was dwelling in Ephraim. Perhaps he was an Ephraimite, and sojourned in Gibeah, but the men of the place were Benjamites. And then we get down here in verse 20. The old man said, peace be with thee. Howsoever, let all thy wants lie upon me, only lodge not in the street. And he brought him into his house and gave provender, or he provided for him, unto his asses, and they washed their feet and did eat and drink. Now as they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, certain sons of worthlessness. Belial means worthless. Certain sons of Belial beset the house. They set themselves up around the house and beat at the door and spake to the master of the house, the old man, saying, bring forth the man that came unto thine house, that we may have sexual relationships with this Levite. Now, among these people, they were not, you had to guard, according to the book of the law, you had to guard these people with your life. You would sacrifice your own family before you would sacrifice a visitor in your household. So they say, we want to have sexual relationship with them. That's the same thing that happened in the 19th chapter of Genesis when Lot is in Sodom, and these men gather around the house and say, bring these two angels out that we may know them. And that's when the angels struck them blind. Remember that? And the man, the master of the house, went out unto them and said unto them, nay, my brethren, nay, I pray you, do not so wickedly, seeing that this man is come into mine house. Do not this folly. Here is my daughter, a maiden, and his concubine. Here's the concubine of this man, but you can't have this man. If you'll notice, I keep saying this, you never see the concubine doing any kind of repenting, do you? She is apostate. He goes down and forces her to come back with him. He goes to Bethlehem, Judah. He comes out of Mount Ephraim, goes down to Bethlehem, Judah, forces her to come back, gets up past Jerusalem, gets up here to Gibeah, and that's a pagan place too. and she never shows any repentance. That's a picture of Israel apostatizing from God. And we know that because the men take the woman, abuse her all night. They take the man's concubine, abuse her all night. In verse 25, she comes back to the house, lays down on the threshold of the house, and dies that night. And then he takes the Levite takes the woman and cuts her up into 12 pieces, down here in verse 29. And when he had come into his house, he took a knife and divided her together with her bones into 12 pieces. This has to be a picture of Israel. It has to be a picture of the church. Must be. This is an allegorical picture of what God is going to do to Israel when she apostatizes. And she's not even a kingdom until this next book. Well, not the next book, till we get to 1 Samuel. Till we get to 1 Samuel, Israel's not even a kingdom. Divide into 12 pieces and send her into all the coasts of Israel. In all probability, one piece to each tribe to show what God is going to do. He's going to scatter Israel. We know this is true because when you look over here in 1 Kings, this 11th chapter, 1 Kings 11th chapter, and we see that Solomon allows his wives to go after all these Shemash, Molech gods, all of these sun gods. God says, I'm going to split up this nation. I'm going to take the kingdom away from the hand of Solomon. I'm going to divide it into two kingdoms, into southern Judah and northern Israel. And southern Judah will be Judah and Benjamin, and northern Israel will be the other 10 tribes. Well, in this 12th chapter, God has the prophet Ahijah to go to Jeroboam. Jeroboam is the king of northern Israel. He was Solomon's commander. But then Solomon got furious at Jeroboam, run him out of the land, but he comes back to the land, becomes Rehoboam's commander, which is Solomon's son, and he becomes captain of the host for Rehoboam. And then when Rehoboam takes this bad advice from his high school buddies, when they say, the old men come and say, be easier on us, your father chastises us with whips. That was a picture of all of the taxes that Solomon had levied upon the people, and that was because he was building the temple. Well, they said, be easier on us. Well, his teenage friends come in, and you tell them you're king, and you just tell your friends that you're the king, and you will chastise them with scorpions. You'll make it tougher than your father ever was. Because Rehoboam took some bad advice, Jeroboam, his commander, took the 10 northern tribes, split off for the southern tribes, and you end up with two tribes. You end up with northern Israel and southern Israel. Southern Israel is named after the tribe of Judah and called southern Judah. Now, Jeroboam is going to be the king, the first king of northern Israel. He's the general. Remember, southern Judah is the lineage of David. Saul comes from Benjamin, the tribe of Benjamin. Wrong tribe to be king. So God has to move in his heart to make him wicked. Then David is of Bethlehem, Judah, there in the 16th chapter of 1 Samuel. And then Solomon, there in the first chapter of 1 Kings, becomes king after David, and he's of Judah, and all these are of Judah, of course, except Athaliah. She's the wicked king. It's a woman king that's the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, and she's killed because she tries to take the kingdom for herself. All these are northern Israel. Northern Israel is not a righteous lineage. It's not a divine lineage of kings. This is the divine right of kings right here. This over here is not a divine lineage. If you can muster up an army big enough to overthrow the king, you can become king of northern Israel. Northern Israel has the inheritance. Southern Judah has the king. Northern Israel is Ephraim. But the Levites live all over southern Judah, northern Israel. They're sojourners everywhere they go because they're the priesthood. Now, let's just read this one more time. I want to read this to show you this is a picture of Israel, this woman being cut up into all these pieces. Look here in 1 Kings, the 11th chapter, And verse 29, and it came to pass at that time when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem, that the prophet Ahijah, the Shilonite, found him in the way, or in the highway, and had clad himself with a new garment, and they two were alone in the field. And Ahijah caught the new garment that was on him and rent it into 12 pieces. Same way the woman is cut into 12 pieces in that 19th chapter, verse 29. This has to be a picture of Israel being scattered in that 19th chapter, verse 29. And rent it into 12 pieces, and he said to Jeroboam, take thee 10 pieces, for thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, behold, I will tear apart the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and give 10 tribes unto you, Jeroboam, right here. He's got the 10 northern tribes. I'm going to give you the 10 tribes, but he shall have one tribe for my servant David's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, the city which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel. I've tossed around why Benjamin was numbered with southern Judah. They were nearly annihilated in that last chapter, in the next to the last chapter of Judges. Benjamin nearly came to nothing, and God has to retain them, and he retained them in southern Judah, makes them a part of the southern kingdom. Because they have forsaken me and have worshipped Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Zidonians, Shemash, the god of the Moabites, and Milcom, the god of the children of Ammon. We don't have any hard time understanding that, do we? Coming to grace and truth. And have not walked in my ways to do that which is right in mine eyes, and keep my statutes and my judgments, as did David his father. Now, and let's read on here. Howbeit, I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand. I'm going to keep Judah for David, but I will make him prince of all the days of his life for David my servant's sake, whom I chose because he kept my commandments and my statutes. But I will take the kingdom out of his son's hand, or out of Solomon's hand, and will give it unto thee, even 10 tribes. And his son will I give one tribe, that David my servant may have a light always before me in Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen me to put my name there. So, and Benjamin joins Judah later on and becomes a part of the southern kingdom. This is the northern kingdom. And Jeroboam is the head of this. And each one of these kings would either die or overthrow the previous one of the two. They'd go in and kill the guy and have what they call a coup, and they'd overthrow him and become the king. Hoshea is the last king of northern Israel, and Zedekiah is the last king of southern Judah. And we've talked about that. Northern Israel carried away in 722 BC. Right there it is, right there. Southern Judah carried away in 586 BC into captivity. Babylon carried southern Judah. Assyria carried northern Israel. I want you to get to where you can see this. It's not really hard. It's just getting the picture. Now, back over here to verse 29 of chapter 19. And when he was come into his house, he took a knife and laid hold on the concubine and divided her together with her bones into 12 pieces. The same thing, 12 pieces of garment over there in that 11th chapter of 1 Kings. This is without a doubt a picture of Israel being scattered, isn't it? There is no doubt in my mind that's what it's talking about, because these 12 pieces depict the nation of Israel. And sent her into all the coasts thereof. Now, in the 20th chapter, we've already said that northern Israel, which is comprised of all of these, Simeon, Reuben, Gad, Manasseh, Issachar, Zebulun, Naphtali, Asher, Ephraim, and Dan, all of these come up and they tell Benjamin, we want you to repent of this. We want you to turn these men over that raped this woman. And Benjamin says, don't tell us what to do. We don't do what you say. We do what we want. So the 11 tribes, Simeon, Reuben, Gad, Manasseh, Issachar, Naphtali, Zebulun, Asher, and West Manasseh, Ephraim, and Dan, they get together and they meet at this place called Mizpah, just about 5 miles above Gibeah, just a few miles up the road from Gibeah, and they get gathered together to attack Benjamin. 11 tribes with their armies are going to attack Benjamin. And there are 400,000 men, fighting men with swords that are going to attack Benjamin. That sounds crazy, doesn't it? And they're going to attack Benjamin because of their apostasy, because they refuse to turn these men over. Benjamin fights like a ravening wolf. They're fixing to take on one of the biggest chores they've ever had. These 11 tribes are going to attack Benjamin, and their hands are going to be full. Benjamin has 26,000 men that wield the sword. It looks like an overpowering victory for the 11 tribes, doesn't it? Well, it ain't. And they go in there to fight with them, and they have this big war, 400,000 against 26,000. And look at verse 21. I've already gone through this Wednesday night. You want the rest of this tape, you can get Wednesday nights. And the children of Benjamin came forth out of Gibeah and destroyed down to the ground of the Israelites of the 11 tribes, 22,000. They fought like a ravening wolf. You come against Benjamin, ooh, your hands are full. Because they were like fighting the Green Beret and the SEALs all at once. It was like these guys were tough as nails. I wonder where they learned to fight this way. Probably from those pagans that lived in their land, because the Amorites loved to fight. They warred against Israel constantly. I'm sure they taught them. In fact, in verse 16 of that chapter, among these people there were 700 chosen men, left-handed. Wonder why God put that in there. The Jews thought left-handed people were evil. Left-handed, everyone could sling stones at a hair's breadth as far as they could throw it. And the sling was a very dangerous weapon. Alexander the Great used companies of men with slings. He pulled some of the trickiest moves in battle against people with slings, and he marched against the Persian army. He marched against the Persian army, and then he started moving sideways. And they thought, what in the world is he doing? And the Persian army far outnumbered Alexander the Great. Moved sideways, and then the horses just took off at a gallop, and behind these horses were all these men with slings, and they started just knocking these guys out right and left over here. And if you take a sling and you use a smooth stone, it'll go straight to the mark. If you take a jagged stone, it'll go. Reason I know that, I used to make slings. Out of my father's old shoes, I'd take a tongue, and I'd take me a long leather strip or shoestring, and I'd sling it around and throw it, and I found out that's why David went and picked up 5 smooth stones out of the brook. And the reason he took them out of a brook is because the water made them smooth. Because he wanted that thing to hit Goliath right there. And these guys were so good. David had no doubt that he could bring Goliath down. It wasn't just the Spirit of God. David wasn't a skinny little kid who was going, I'm just David, a little shepherd boy. God guide this stone. No, David said, I can hit him and bring him down. I've already killed a bear and a lion. I can get him. He's a lumbering old giant. I'll move around him so fast he won't know what hit him when I hit him. He knew what he could do. These guys were that good. Now, we see that they killed 22,000 there, and then Israel goes back and prays to God. Oh, God, what are we going to do? They're killing us. Benjamin is killing all 11 of us tribes. They fought like wolves. You didn't mess with Benjamin. They were tough. And Benjamin, so they go back against Benjamin the second day in verse 24, and then verse 25. Benjamin went forth against them out of Gibeah the second day, and Benjamin destroyed down to the ground of the children of Israel another 18,000. You think Benjamin was tough to deal with? Fought like a ravening wolf. Another 18,000. So they killed 22,000. Killed another 18,000.
they've only got 26,000 men with swords. So here they are, they got 40,000 they've killed. And Israel's saying, what are we going to do? So God says, you're going to have to go in there and put what they call liars. We're not talking about Kenneth Copeland, L-I-E-R-S. Ambush. You got to have, well, he does ambush the needy, doesn't he? We are talking about Kenneth Copeland after all. So you're going to have to ambush. So what they did, they did an old 1938 Bob Steele Western trick on them. If anybody remembers Bob Steele or Hoot Gibson. He pulled an old trick on them. And they pulled him away. They went out and they attacked him, and then they ran away from him, pulled away from the city, and then they went in there and set their city on fire, set Benjamin's city on fire, and they turned their backs on who they were attacking, said, oh, we got to go save our homes. And then they attacked him. That's the only way they could beat Benjamin. They had to do something tricky because Benjamin was ravened as a wolf. They were hard to fight. We're talking about 11 tribes fighting one tribe. Well, they go in there and they wipe out nearly everybody in the city. Finally, they get them on the run. But they lose more people in Israel than they've got fighting men. They lose more army than they even got fighting men in Benjamin. So Benjamin ravens as a wolf. They end up with only 600 men turned. Look in verse 47. 600 men in chapter 20. 600 men turned and fled to the wilderness unto Rimmon. Rimmon is in northern Israel. 600 men turned and fled to the wilderness unto the rock Rimmon, and abode into the rock Rimmon 4 months. And the men of Israel turned again upon the children of Benjamin, and smote them with the edge of the sword, as well the men of every city, and as the beast, and all that came to hand. Also they set on fire all the cities that they came to. They only got them on the run because they tricked them. Benjamin would have fought them to the death. They were like the Japanese during World War II. The Japanese said, we'll fight to the last man. That's why Truman said he dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, because they knew if we went into Japan that we would end up losing at least, they estimated, 1 million soldiers, because those people would have died in their homes. This is the way Benjamin felt. We'll die down to the last man. You can't fight us. We don't care. We will die. And they were very rebellious. Well, we find that Benjamin doesn't have any women left. They have actually killed off most of the women, children, and many of the men. You got 600 men here. What are they going to do to save the tribe of Benjamin? All because Benjamin was involved in wanting to put their approval on this homosexual acts of these probably Amorite men, pagan men. Benjamin didn't want you coming within their boundaries and telling them what you're going to do with them. You're not telling us what to do. No sirree. So they have a way of remedying this. Let's read here in chapter 21, verse 1. Now the men of Israel had sworn in Mizpah. Mizpah is just a few miles above Gibeah. It's just up here, just north of, remember Gibeah is just above Jerusalem, just a few miles. And Mizpah is right up here. Now Mizpah was a town that Israel continually met in whenever they had a national problem and they wanted to gather troops together. They would gather together at Mizpah. This was a place for gathering together the troops, mustering the troops together so they could make some attack on Israel. They used Gilgal at some times, but they also used Mizpah. So they swore at Mizpah, saying, there shall not any of us give his daughter unto Benjamin to wife. They didn't have women left. They were just about all gone, all dead. They had gone in and slaughtered their own brothers, slaughtered their sisters to the ground. And the people came. Now, this was a rash statement they made. just because they made this statement, it doesn't mean it's a righteous statement, because they renege on this statement later. They realize Benjamin's not going to be a surviving tribe if they don't do something to help, because they have just about annihilated Benjamin. And the people came to the house of God and abode there till even before God, and lifted up their voices and wept sore, and said, O Lord God of Israel, why is this come to pass in Israel? Why is this thing come to pass that Benjamin is just about slaughtered and wiped out? That there should be today one tribe lacking in Israel. How can this be? I don't know. How in the world could it be? We know that Benjamin, raven like a wolf, was a fighting team. And said, O Lord Israel, why has this come to pass in Israel, that there should be one tribe lacking in Israel? And it came to pass on the morrow that the people rose early and built their altar and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. This is Israel, not really including Benjamin. Benjamin is mourning over its burned cities and over all of the death of all of its men. Of course, we know that, I forgot to give you this over in verse 35 of the previous chapter, that the Lord smote Benjamin the day they came in and tricked him and drew him out of the city. The Lord smote Benjamin before Israel, and the children of Israel destroyed of the Benjamites that day 25,100 men. They had 26,000 men. There's only 900 men left, fighting men in Benjamin, all that drew the sword. So here they are. They're going to try to do something to rejuvenate Benjamin. Verse 5. And the children of Israel said, Who is there among all the tribes of Israel that came not up with the congregation unto the Lord? Who didn't come to Mizpah to help us? Who didn't come to Mizpah to gather together to attack Benjamin? Do I understand that? I'm going to keep studying. Maybe I'll understand. Boy, what is the thing? Who didn't come to help us? They said Jabesh Gilead didn't come. Gilead is the land, before Israel came in and occupied the land, Gilead. Gilead is like a state. Before Israel came in and occupied the land, Gilead was east and west of the Jordan River. This was all the land of Gilead. Jabesh Gilead would be like saying Nashville, Tennessee. Jabesh was a city in Gilead. Well, Gilead was Jabesh Gilead was up here, about right here. They did not come down here to help and meet down here at Mizpah to help attack Benjamin. Now, I wrestle with this. Why are they, why does everybody have to be there? Yes, they all have to be there in one cause. If they're not there in one cause, whoever's not there, there's going to be great punishment upon them. They're trying to retain the integrity and the righteousness of Israel. And Jabesh Gilead sat at home like, we don't care. Jabesh Gilead is mentioned 4 times in the Bible, and it's a very important town. Let's read here. Which verse was I in? And the children of Israel, who is there among the tribes of Israel that came not up with the congregation unto the Lord? For they had made a great oath concerning him that came not up to the Lord, to Mizpah, just above Gibeah, a place there where they could amass their armies to go in and attack the tribes of Benjamin there at Gibeah. And they surely had brought all their soldiers over there to Gibeah. He shall surely be put to death. Whoever hasn't come to help us is going to die. And the children of Israel repented them for Benjamin their brother, and said, There is one tribe cut off from Israel this day. I wrestle with the shadows in this and the pictures in it. You can study it. You can help me. How shall we do for wives for them that remain? What are we going to do for these 600 men that are left? they need wives. We've got to have 12 tribes of Israel. Well, you're going to have 12 tribes to have the picture all the way through the Scriptures, aren't you? Remember, there were 12 baskets full of bread left over there in John the 6th chapter after Jesus fed the 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. There were 12 baskets full so that none would be lost. And of all that the Father had given me, in that same chapter, verse 39, I should lose nothing. The 12 has to be the picture of Israel. There's 144,000 that are the first fruits. And of his own will begat he us, that we might be a kind of first fruits. And we're the 144,000. That's 12 times 12. There were 12 tribes. There were 12 apostles. How shall we do for wives for them that remain, seeing we have sworn by the Lord that we have not given them our daughters to wives? We swore that in the first verse of this chapter. We're not going to give our daughters to them. But they repent of this, and they're weeping for Benjamin. They're weeping and they're grieving over Benjamin being so apostate. And we need to grieve over one another being so apostate that want to fight against God, don't we? They said, what one is there of the tribe of Israel that came not up to Mizpah to the Lord to fight with us against Benjamin? And behold, there came none to the camp from Jabesh Gilead to the assembly. It's amazing. Jabesh Gilead is the first place that Saul defended in battle in the 11th chapter of 1 Samuel. For the people were numbered, and behold, there were none of the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead there. And the congregation sent thither 12,000 men of the valiantest of Israel, and commanded them, saying, go and kill the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead, because they didn't come. With the edge of the sword, with the women and the children, kill them all. But remember, there's no king in Israel, and everyone is doing what is right in his own eyes. I'm not even going to say that everything that they're doing is right, because it can't be. They're just saying, let's kill anybody that hasn't helped us. You got to realize you're dealing with human beings with all kinds of faults and all kinds of sins. Just because it's in the Bible don't mean let's go kill everybody that don't help us, you know. And this is the thing that ye shall do. Ye shall utterly destroy every male, every woman that hath lain by man. The only thing you'll save is the virgin women. And these will be for wives of Benjamin. And they found among the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead, up here, 400 young virgins that had known no man by lying with any male. And these are the ones that they're going to give to these 600 men up here in verse 47 of the previous chapter. I just drew a line from verse 47 of chapter 20 down to verse 11 of chapter 21. 400 virgins that had known no man by lying with any male, and they brought them into the camp of Shiloh. Shiloh's in Ephraim, about 10 miles above Mizpah. About 10 miles up here, above Mizpah, which is the land of Canaan. And in Shiloh was where the Ark of the Covenant was kept until it was one of the last places the Ark of the Covenant was kept until the temple was built. And the whole congregation sent some to speak to the children of Benjamin that were in the rock Rimmon. Rimmon is in upper Zebulon. That's up here. And Zebulon up here. It's above Cana of Galilee. Here's Nazareth down here. Cana and Rimmon is up here. And the whole congregation sent some to speak to the children of Benjamin that were in the rock Rimmon. They were running and hiding. These men, these 600 men, in that 47th verse of the previous chapter, are hiding up here in Rimmon. And to call peaceably unto them, you can come back now. We've killed everybody we're going to kill. And Benjamin came again at that time, and they gave them these 400 virgin wives in verse 12, to these 600 men in verse 47 of the previous chapter. Now, I don't know how they divided them up. That's not enough wives. They got 200 guys left. That's not going to have any wives. Which they had saved alive of the women of Jabesh Gilead after they had slaughtered Jabesh Gilead. And yet so they sufficed them not. And the people repented them for Benjamin, because that the Lord had made a breach or a gap in the tribes of Israel between Benjamin and the rest of the tribes. Then the elders of the congregation said, how shall we do for wives? What are we going to do for wives? For them that remain, these 200 men that remain, seeing the women are destroyed out of Benjamin. We got to get some more wives. And they said, there must be an inheritance for them, be escaped of Benjamin, that a tribe be not destroyed out of Israel. We got to have 12 tribes in Israel. We're going to have 12 over there in Revelation. We're going to have 12, the 12 numbered, the 144,000 numbered in the 7th chapter of Revelation. We're going to have the 12 baskets full. You're going to have 12 apostles. You got to have 12 tribes. We cannot have Israel without having the 12th tribe. You realize how close that Benjamin came to annihilation? Just about gone. It was because, you know why they were annihilated? They liked to fight. You know, when you like to fight, you're going to get annihilated. It don't matter who you think you are. Don't matter how tough you are. There's always somebody going to whip you. Ask Rusty. He was a world champion martial arts guy. He said, man, some guy hit me over in Memphis. He kept hitting me. Can you say that, Rusty? He said, one day you get caught by somebody. The only reason that Benjamin was nearly destroyed, and this will happen to our lives, is because he says, you're not going to tell me what to do. I'll keep these pagans and these homosexuals in here if I want to, and I'll defend them. Nobody comes into my land telling me what to do. We fight. It's because he was ornery and cussed. That's why. You fight, you get destroyed. Every time, somewhere. Don't you? Don't care how tough you are. Don't care what kind of champion you are. Somebody's going to beat your ears down. When Evander Holyfield, Mike Tyson thought, I got the toughest right in the world. And he did have when he was 20. When Evander Holyfield went in and knocked him out. The only reason he beat him in the ears is because he knew he was fixing to get knocked out again. Eventually, I don't care how tough you are and who you are. In life, you can say, I'm going to do things the way I want, and you can fight. And when you fight, you're going to get destroyed. We are not out here to fight. We're out here to help each other, aren't we? And that's what happened to Benjamin. And they were as fierce as anybody. They were as fierce as Rusty. They were as bad as you can get, but they got destroyed. And the people repented them for Benjamin, verse 15, that the Lord made a breach in the tribes of Israel. Then the elders of the congregation said, how shall we do for wives for them that remain? We got 200 more men that we need to get wives for. Seeing the women are destroyed out of Benjamin, and they said, there must be an inheritance for them that be escaped of Benjamin, that a tribe be not destroyed out of Israel. Howbeit we may not give them wives of our daughters. We made that oath in verse 1. For the children of Israel have sworn, saying, cursed be he that giveth a wife to Benjamin. Then they said, behold, there's a feast of the Lord in Shiloh yearly, in a place which is on the north side of Bethel, just above Bethel, in Shiloh, on the east side of the highway that goeth up from Bethel to Shechem, and on the south of Lebanah. Therefore they commanded the children of Israel, saying, go lie in wait in the vineyards. These men of Benjamin go out in the vineyards and lay in wait, and we're going to play a little game like little children play. Reminds me of little kids. What's going on here? And see, behold, if the daughters of Shiloh come out to dance in dances, then come out of the vineyards and catch every man his wife. of the daughters of Shiloh and go to the land of Benjamin and take her back home, you 200 that don't have a wife. That's nearly funny. Looks like some kids playing. And it shall be when their fathers of their brethren come unto us to complain that we will say unto them, cut us some slack, be favorable unto them for our sakes, because we reserved not to each man his wife in the war. We didn't set his wife back, we killed his wife. They got to have wives. We got to have a 12th tribe. For ye did not give unto them at this time that you should be guilty. And the children of Benjamin did so, and took them wives according to their number of them that danced, whom they caught. And they went and returned unto their inheritance to the land of Benjamin. And they repaired the city that had been burnt down during that war between the 11 tribes between Benjamin, and dwelt in them. This is one of the most amazing stories in the Bible. It's just astounding that God will, but He's going to reserve a remnant for Himself, isn't He? He's not going to let it. It's like David said, the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down. For the Lord holdeth him with his hand. God is going to reserve Himself a people, just like He's reserving Benjamin here. And the children of Israel departed thence at that time, every man to his tribe, the war's over, and to his family. And they went out from thence, every man to his inheritance. In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. The end. Well, it's not the end. It's not the end. This is the last incident in the book of Judges. Now, we've said that Benjamin was a fighter. God uses men of Benjamin to show, particularly the first king of Israel, Saul, was of the tribe of Benjamin. He was from Gibeah. He was from that, and it was Saul that attacked his own hometown, because every time that he would get to chasing David, I want to show you how these men fought in the sense that we'll look at Saul. Go over here to the 11th chapter of 1 Samuel. How much time do I have, Mike? Look here. 11th chapter, 1 Samuel. Benjamin ravened as a wolf. We've got to actually go through these things to see. The first king of Israel was Saul. He was of the tribe of Benjamin, and he ravened like a wolf. You get to the 11th chapter of 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel, 11th chapter. In the 11th chapter, this is Saul's first battle. In the 9th chapter, Saul is chosen to be king. He meets Samuel. Samuel anoints him as king in the 9th chapter. In the 8th chapter, this is where the people come to Samuel and say, give us a king. We want a king like all the people of the land. They have a king. We want one. And it's in the 8th chapter that Samuel warns them, if you get a king, you'll take your sons. He'll send them by 50s before the chariots. They always would send 50 men before the chariots into battle. He said, your sons are going to go into battle, 50 before the chariots, and they're going to die. And your daughters are going to take them and put them up there in the king's castle, put them in the king's house, and they're going to become bakers and confectioners, not even going to see them. God has got an army. He is the king of Israel. We know that God was the king of Israel. And that's why Jesus is called King of the Jews. He was the king of Israel. Hold on a second. I was going to get me a Kleenex. Get me a drink of water. Don't see any Kleenex. Huh? Pink lips, okay. Pink lipstick chips. Mary's a smart aleck. All right. Remember this. I want you to get a hold of these things. We're gonna go through Samuel, but along the way, while I'm teaching on this, I'm going to be going over into the books of the kings. I went through the books of the kings when we talked about the high points of Baal and grove worship. I want you to see that in the 8th chapter, this is where the people ask for a king. They ask for a king. And the main reason is that Samuel was the spokesman for He was God's mouth upon the earth. That's what the prophet was. He was the mouth of God. And Samuel had two evil sons. He had two evil sons. This seems to be a habit in Israel because Eli, in that second chapter, had two evil sons, Hophni and Phinehas. And back here, Aaron had two evil sons. He had Nadab and Abihu. Well, Samuel's got two evil sons, and they say, look, we're tired. We think that your evil sons are going to become the leaders in Israel, and we want a king. And he tells them what's going to happen. They say, we want one anyway. Well, God picks out Saul out of the tribe of Benjamin. Well, Saul has to be affected by these pagans in this land, doesn't he? Evil communications. Whenever you hang around people, you're going to get dirty. And he was raised with a bunch of fighting heathen men. Some of it had to bleed off on him. There was no separating in the city of Gibeah or in the city of Jerusalem. You couldn't separate from these. And they had them all over the territory. That's why they had to either gather at Mizpah or they had to gather at Gilgal. It was a common gathering place, these cities were, so they could go and attack some of these cities that were in their own lands. They had garrisons of all these different armies throughout the land of Israel. And they were always having to go over there and attack some city because they hadn't driven them out. Well, in that 9th chapter, God picks out Saul, and that's where Saul meets Samuel. And Samuel anoints Saul as the first man king. We know according to the 12th chapter of 1 Samuel that God was their king. According to the 13th chapter of Hosea, God was their king. And if God was the king of the Jews, then the God of the Old Testament, the I am God, and Jesus said before Abraham was, I am. The I am God was Jesus. He was king of the Jews, wasn't he? He was king of the Jews long before he came here. He was their king. And we get into this 10th chapter. Actually, he's anointed in the 10th chapter. And the 11th chapter, he doesn't receive his full coronation till the 12th chapter. The 12th chapter is where Samuel steps down and warns them. He warns them in the 12th chapter. You go after these gods, God will not only send the sword, the famine, and pestilence, he'll send so much rain, he will wash your crops away. And that terrified them. They went, whoa, we can't handle that. In the 11th chapter, he gets his first chance to fight. Here is a Benjamite fighting, ravening like a wolf. Let's read here in chapter 11, verse 1. This is Saul's first battle. And Nahash, the Ammonite, came up and encamped against Jabesh Gilead. That's the ones that didn't come down, did they? They're right up here. Jabesh Gilead is up in here, right about there. They didn't come down. No, we're not going down to fight. And Saul comes up against Jabesh Gilead, and all the men of Jabesh said unto Nahash. Nahash is king of the Ammonites. This is the land of Ammon over here. Ammon Jordan is up here, right here, where Kaman is, right about there. And the Ammonites was the same thing as northern Jordan. The same thing as this right here. Right here. See, there's Jordan, right there. This is the land of Ammon. See Ammon Jordan? And Ammon and Moab were the two sons of Lot when his daughters took him up into a mountain, had sexual relationship with him, and that wasn't because of the reason. They didn't do that for sex. They did it because anyone who was a descendant of Abraham had hopes that out of their loins would come the Messiah. So they wanted to retain the seed of their father when they came out of Sodom, and they went into this mountain, and they had this sexual affair with their father, and they had Ben-Ami, or Ammon, comes from that, and he was the second born. The firstborn was Moab. Moab is southern Jordan. Now, this is Saul the great Benjamite. In fact, you can look in the 9th chapter. Look at the 9th chapter real quick. Verse 1, there was a man of Benjamin, right here, Gibeah particularly, man of Benjamin, whose name was Kish, the son of Abiel, the son of Zeror, the son of Bechorath, the son of Aphiah, a Benjamite, a mighty man of power, and he had a son whose name was Saul, a choice young man and a goodly, Tovah, T-O-W-B, beautiful, fair to look upon. And there was not among the children of Israel a goodlier person than he. From his shoulders and upward he was higher than any of the people in Israel. He was the tallest man in Israel. That's why when in the 16th chapter of this book, when Jesse trots out Eliab and says, surely this is the one that's going to take Saul's place. Look how tall he is. And God says, I've already had a tall guy. I don't need another one. I need a man committed to me. Give me that freckle-faced, red-headed kid over there, David. That's who I want. It's not how big you are. It's not how tough you are. It's not how eloquent you are. What God wants from men is faithfulness. It's required in stewardess a man's be found faithful, not eloquent. I'm not very eloquent. These guys can speak circles around when it comes to big fancy words. I'm going to teach you Bible. I'm not going to teach you 15 $10 words that you don't understand by the end of the message. Now, you want to hear that, you can listen to Hank Hanegraaff, the ontological God and the protagonist of the who in the world knows what a protagonist is? Good night, you guys. Truck drivers don't understand a word you're saying. Teach them Bible. That's what people need, isn't it? I believe if I teach you these timelines and these stories and these men, you'll see what you're supposed to do. That's what you'll do. When you look at Benjamin being rebellious against God and how God bringing him to a place of annihilation because he was associating with the wrong people and he wouldn't get it out of his life. You can take Benjamin and see that. And you will fight like a wolf until you realize you can't have your way until God destroys you. And Nahash the Ammonite, now we're talking about Saul being king of Israel. He hasn't received the coronation until the 12th chapter. That's when Samuel steps down and warns him. I'm warning you. That 12th chapter is very important. He's picked in 9. He's anointed in 10. He fights his first war in 11. And boy, he is mean and mad. He doesn't even contain himself. You can see his rage. You can see he ravens like a wolf because he's of the tribe of Benjamin. Evidently, he was taught well. And Nahash the Ammonite answered them, on this condition will I make a covenant with you, with those at Jabesh Gilead. He goes up against Jabesh Gilead. He says, I'll make a covenant with you under one condition, and lay it for a reproach upon Israel. And the elders of Jabesh said unto him, give us 7 days of respite. Give us 7 days of rest so we can find out if we can get somebody to defend us, that we may send messengers unto all the coast of Israel. And then if there be no man to save us, we will come out to thee and we'll surrender to you. Then came the messengers to Gibeah of Saul. We're familiar with Gibeah, aren't we? That's that city just there above Jerusalem. That's the home of Saul. That's where Saul spent his time. He didn't spend most of his time down in Jerusalem. He went home to Gibeah just a few miles up the road and told the tidings in the ears of the people, and all the people lifted up their voices and wept. And behold, Saul after the herd of the field came after the herd of the field. And Saul said, what aileth the people that they weep? These people of Jabesh Gilead. And they told him the tidings of the men of Jabesh. And the Spirit of God came upon Saul when he heard those tidings, and his anger was kindled, and he went into a rage. It's because he grew up in Gibeah, because he was taught by the Amorites to fight. And he took a yoke of oxen, cut them in pieces. I can just see the rage of Saul. I'll kill people going to come in and take over my land. I'm the king here. He lost his temper often. He lost his cool. And we see in that 13th, 14th, and 15th chapter, he loses his cool all the time. He was tall and handsome, and he's not a goodlier man in all of Israel, but he got messed up. And he was the anointed of the Lord, and he was a believer. It just shows you how bad you can be a believer. And he took a yoke of oxen and hewed them in pieces and sent them through all the coast of Israel, probably in 12 pieces, by the hands of the messengers, saying, Whosoever cometh not forth after Saul and after Samuel, so shall it be done unto his oxen. I'll cut your oxen to pieces. That was their living. That's right, he's performing a contract, yes. That's exactly what he's doing. They acted out their contracts, and they'd perform these contracts with some form of matter of some kind. And the fear of the Lord fell on the people, and they came out with one consent. When he numbered them at Bezek, the children of Israel were 300,000, and the men of Judah 30,000. And they said unto the messengers that came, Thus shall ye say unto the men of Jabesh Gilead, Tomorrow by that time the sun be hot, you'll have help. By noon tomorrow, I'll be there. And the messengers came and showed it to the men of Jabesh, and they were glad. Therefore the men of Jabesh said, Tomorrow we will come out unto you. This is amazing. Saul of Gibeah is willing to help Jabesh Gilead. I wonder if it had anything to do with they weren't willing to come down and attack Gibeah many years before. Well, they've been on our side ever since, so I'll go and rescue them. Saul may have had that as a motive. Yeah. Yeah. Their mothers this was like kinfolk. This was like kinfolk. The wives of the men of Benjamin were Jabesh, so it was like half brothers up there. We got to go rescue our brothers. I don't think Saul was doing this just because he wanted to rescue Israel. I think he had ulterior motives. And ye shall do with us all that seemeth good unto you. And it was so on the morrow that Saul put the people in 3 companies, and they came into the midst of the host in the morning watch and slew the Ammonites until the heat of the day. And it came to pass that they which remained were scattered, so that 2 of them were not left together, and Saul literally slaughtered the king of the Ammonites. And the people said unto Samuel, Who is he that said, Shall Saul reign over us? That's in 10:27. You can go back to chapter 10, verse 27. Look at that, 10:27. And the children of Belial said, How shall this man save us? How's Saul going to save us? Well, he's a fighting man of Benjamin. He fights like a ravening wolf. He was taught well. And then, who said Saul shall reign over us? Bring the men that we may put them to death. And Saul said, There shall not a man be put to death this day, for today the Lord hath wrought salvation in Israel. Then said Samuel to the people, Come and let us go to Gilgal and renew the kingdom there. And here's Gilgal right there. That's the first place that Israel encamped when they came across the river after 40 years in the wilderness. And all the people went to Gilgal, and there they made Saul king before the Lord in Gilgal, and there they sacrificed sacrifices of peace offerings before the Lord. And there Saul and all the men of Israel rejoiced greatly. I got to give you something about Jabesh Gilead. When you get through this book, and David is anointed king in 16, and then in 17, chapter 17, he goes out and fights. Chapter 16, David is anointed king because Saul doesn't execute God's fierce wrath against Amalek in 15. 13 through 15, Saul shows his colors. 13 through 15. We're going to go through all this. Then 16, God says, Samuel says Saul's kingdom is over in 15. Then David is anointed in 16 by God. And David is the king in God's eyes till 31, but Saul is king all the way through here in the people's eyes. Saul is king. Saul's got about 3,000 in his army as he chases David when he's got 400 to 500. And he begins to chase David in chapter 19. He sets him up to assassinate him in chapter 19. He's chasing him all the way to 31. In 31, Saul goes to Mount Gilboa, and he's in battle with the Philistines. And that's the time that Saul dies at the hand of the Philistines over in chapter 31. Look here. Chapter 31. In verse 1, now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from the Philistines and fell down slain in Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines followed hard upon Saul and upon his sons. And the Philistines slew Jonathan and Abinadab and Melchishua, Saul's sons. And then Saul falls upon his sword. Saul said to his armor bearer in verse 4, draw your sword and thrust me through. And then Saul took his sword and fell upon it, there in that same 4th verse. And Saul is dead. There's much conflict as to how Saul died, because you get into the next book and an Edomite comes along and says, I killed him. Well, we're not going to get into that right now. But down here in verse 8, and it came to pass on the morrow, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen in Mount Gilboa, and they cut off his head and stripped off his armor and sent into the land of the Philistines round about to publish it in the house of their idols and among the people. And they put his armor in the house of Ashtaroth, and they fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. And when the inhabitants of Jabesh-Gilead heard that which the Philistines had done to Saul, they're the ones that he rescued in the 11th chapter, aren't they? This is why they're here. They heard he had been their Savior. He had been their Lone Ranger. He had been their Zorro. He had been their Superman. And all the valiant men of Jabesh-Gilead arose and went all night and took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from being desecrated from the walls of Bethshan, and came to Jabesh and burnt them there, and took their bones and buried them under a tree at Jabesh, and fasted 7 days. It was the men of Jabesh-Gilead that did this, because he had rescued them in his first battle in the 11th chapter. Gilboa is, I have forgotten. I believe it's up here, because they went over across Jabesh-Gilead and brought his body back. I believe it's right up here on top of Manasseh. Yeah. In fact, one of the writers said there was a trench they could crawl up in there, and they could go over, and there was a waterfall making a lot of noise at night. They went in there and snuck in there at night and pulled his body out. They didn't want him to be desecrated this way. And David finally moves his body. Look in 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel 21. 12. And this is at the end of David's life. You get down close to the end of his life. Remember, in the first part of this chapter, he says that the Gibeonites are the Amorites in verse 2. And this is where Saul slaughters the Gibeonites. In verse 12, David went and took the bones of Saul and the bones of Jonathan, his son, from the men of Jabesh-Gilead, which had stolen them from secret of Bethshan, where the Philistines had hanged them, when the Philistines had slain Saul in Gilboa. And he brought up from thence the bones of Saul. See, David loved Saul, even though Saul always tried to kill him. And David was going to honor him after he's dead. And Saul was trying to slaughter David. He kept after him, was constantly trying to kill him from 19 all the way through 31 till he was killed. But Saul saw David a last time, and he said, and David had him trapped in a like a furrow. It's like a ditch. And God caused a deep sleep to come on Saul, and David stood back away from him. And Saul woke up and saw David at a distance, and he started crying. He said, I know you're going to be king of Israel. I know that now. Would you not kill my sons? Because it was the common practice to kill the sons of the king before, because they would rise up. And Jonathan was one of the sons, and Jonathan, David's souls were knit together. And he says that he brought up from thence the bones of Saul and the bones of Jonathan his son, and they gathered the bones of them that were hanged, and the bones of Saul and Jonathan his son buried they in the country of Benjamin and Zebulon in the sepulchre of Kish his father. And they performed all that the king commanded, and after that God was entreated for the land. This is I hope you can get a hold of this thing about these cities and towns, because you need to know where these things are happening. I'm out of time. To understand and see, Saul was a fighter. I believe he got his ability to fight through being raised around the Amorites. That was an Amorite city.
Wasn't Paul from
Who? Yeah, Paul was a Benjamite. He was a violent man. Yeah, and Paul was of the tribe of Benjamin. And he was a violent man. Benjamin was fighters. Boy, they were tough. You didn't mess with them. They'd get their whole gang after you. They were the original MS-13 gang. Well, let's pray. Father, we thank you for truth and for the word. Help us to see how we ought to live. Not like Benjamin, being rebellious, not just fighting against you and against your judgments. Help us to continue this work. Lead us to your elect, and we'll praise you and glorify you and give you honor for all things. Help this ministry. Open up many doors, God. I'll preach this word till I die. Strengthen the flock. I pray for the sheep. Cause them to grow in this truth. Cause them to mature. Cause them not to fight one another, not to fight you. And get rid of this sin out of our lives, unlike Benjamin that was not willing to. Because, Lord, you'll destroy us eventually. We thank you for your word. We ask all this in Christ's name. Amen. Huh? A lot of ground, wasn't it? A lot of ground. Yeah, but how much ground is there to cover? Gracious. But you got to listen to the Wednesday nights to get the full gist of this. Y'all hadn't heard the Wednesday nights, have you? You got to listen to that one to get the full gist of this one.
Loved it.
You like
I
this?
loved it.
You like it?
Pink lipstick ships.
Pink lipstick ships.
Trying to kiss and make up. Trying to kiss and make up for dogging you.
She said pink lipstick ships.
I hear you say that.
Yeah.
I knew that's what you were going to say.
It's like loose lips.
What are you doing?
I knew not to lose
I
lips.
love you.
Hey, I'm going to see what I can do about that car.
Okay.
I'm off today.
Okay.
I had an old book and stuff when I printed it out, and that's where this one, there was an old book.
You got about
But
the
it
same
said,
thing I had.
And it had Gad.
Come here, little boy. See Papa. Give me
It had
her.
Gad right there. You're making
Oh, okay. Give me a
I
hug.
want to speak on this.
You want to say hi to everybody? Say, this is my Papa, and I'm Christopher.
This is my papa and this is my...
You're so